The night my son-in-law looked me in the eye and said, "You're suffocating us," I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I set down my fork, folded my napkin on the table, and said, very quietly, "Then I suppose you'll be handling the $31,000 yourself." He went completely still. My daughter, Patrice, looked at her husband like she'd never seen him before. And just like that, 4 years of silence ended at a Tuesday night dinner table. But let me back up. Because that moment didn't come from nowhere. It came from 68 years of learning when to speak and when to wait. My name is Judith. I'm 68 years old, retired after 31 years as an office manager for a dental practice in Columbus, Ohio. My husband Frank passed 6 years ago, pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. I still reach for his hand sometimes when I'm watching television. We raised 2 children in a 4-bedroom house on Clover Mill Road. Our son Kevin lives in Portland now with his wife and their 2 little boys. He calls every Sunday. Then there's Patrice, my daughter. She was always the complicated one, not in a bad way. She just felt everything more deeply than most people. Sensitive, brilliant, stubborn as a fence post. She married Nathan 4 years ago. I tried to love him. I really did. Nathan was charming at the wedding. He gave a toast that made people laugh, helped clear tables, hugged me twice, and called me Mom. I thought, well, Frank would have liked him. That was the highest compliment I had. The cracks started small. They always do. 6 months after the wedding, Patrice called me on a Wednesday morning. She sounded tired in a way I recognized, the kind of tired that isn't about sleep. "Mom, I hate to ask this." "Then don't hate it," I said. "Just ask." They were behind on rent. The apartment in Cincinnati was $1,450 a month, and Nathan's freelance work had been slow. Patrice was working as an elementary school aide while finishing her teaching certification. Money was tight everywhere you looked. "How much?" I asked. 2 months, so tiny $900. "But Mom, I promise." "Patrice," I stopped her. "I'll send it today." I didn't tell her it was fine because it wasn't entirely fine. I'm on a fixed income, Social Security plus what Frank left, but she was my daughter and she was struggling, and that was that. I sent the $900 through Zelle. She called me crying with gratitude. I told her to save her tears for something harder. That should have been the end of it, a one-time thing. Help when you need it, stand on your feet when you can. But 3 months later, she called again. Same reason, different month. This time it was $1,450, 1 month's rent. I sent it. 4 months after that, another call. This time, Nathan got on the phone too, which surprised me. He thanked me warmly, called me a lifesaver, said he had 2 big contracts coming in that would change everything. He sounded so certain, so confident. I sent another $1,450. I want you to understand something. I am not a foolish woman. I managed the finances for a 12-dentist practice for over 2 decades. I know what a budget looks like. I know what cash flow means. I tracked every transfer I made to my daughter in a little spiral notebook I keep in my kitchen drawer, the date, the amount, what it was for. By the time 18 months had passed, that notebook showed $14,600. $14,600. I hadn't said a word to anyone, not to Kevin, not to my sister Lorraine. No one. Because here's the thing about quietly helping your child, you tell yourself it's love. And it is love. But after a while, you have to be honest with yourself about whether it's also something else, whether you're helping them build something or helping them avoid building it themselves. I started asking that question around month 14. What changed my thinking wasn't the money. It was a Sunday afternoon in April. I drove down to Cincinnati to take Patrice to lunch for her birthday. Nathan had said he had a work call and couldn't join us, which was fine. I picked her up. We went to a little Italian place she liked on Madison Road, and we had a good afternoon. She seemed happy, relaxed even. She showed me pictures of the apartment. They'd redecorated the living room. New sectional sofa. I recognized the style from a furniture store catalog. I had the same catalog at home. That sofa ran $2,200 minimum. New television above the fireplace. Easily 65 inches. I didn't say anything. I looked at the pictures and I smiled and I said it looked lovely. but on the drive home, I did the math. Nathan had told me twice on the phone that money was tight because his clients were slow to pay. Yet the living room I was looking at in those photos had not been decorated on a tight budget. I am not an unreasonable woman. People buy things sometimes, even when they shouldn't. I know that. But I also noticed something else in those photos that I couldn't stop thinking about. In the corner of one picture, just barely visible on the kitchen counter, was a receipt. It was blurry, but I could make out the logo. It was from a spa downtown, the kind of place that charges $180 for an afternoon package. I'm 68 years old, and I have not been to a spa in my life. I kept driving. I didn't call Patrice. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just started paying very close attention. Over the next 2 months, Patrice's Instagram had pictures I hadn't noticed before. A weekend in Nashville with friends, a dinner out that looked expensive, charcuterie boards and cocktails, and the kind of lighting that costs money before you've even ordered. Nathan was in some of the photos, laughing, arm around my daughter, looking like a man without a single financial concern in the world. Meanwhile, I was sending them rent money. The next time Patrice called to ask for help, $1,450, like clockwork, I said yes. But I also said something I hadn't said before. "Can I ask you something, honey?" "Of course, Mom." "Is Nathan working? I mean actively. Do you have income coming in besides yours?" There was a pause. Just a half second too long. "He has some projects in the pipeline, Mom. It's just freelance. You know how it goes." "I do," I said. "I'll send it today." And I did. But I also wrote something new in my spiral notebook. Not just the amount. I wrote, She hesitated. I'm not sure when exactly I decided to stop. It wasn't one dramatic moment. It was more like watching water come to a boil. You check it, and then one day you look and the whole thing is rolling. By month 22, my notebook showed $21,800. Then, that September, Patrice called to tell me something that took my breath away. "Mom, we want to move in with you, just for a little while. 6 months, maybe. Nathan has a really strong lead on a long-term contract, and if we can save on rent during that time, we'll be able to put money away and eventually—" "Move in," I repeated. "I know it's a lot to ask, but you have the space, and you're alone. And honestly, Mom, I think it would be good for both of us, for all of us." I thought about Frank, about how quiet the house had been for 6 years, about how I'd learned to be okay inside that quiet. I thought about my daughter's face when she was 7 years old and had a nightmare and crawled into bed between Frank and me. "Okay," I said. "They moved in on October 3rd. I want to be clear, having Patrice in the house was not without its joys. She made coffee every morning before I came downstairs. She watched old movies with me on Friday nights. There were moments, real moments, that I was grateful for. Nathan was a different story. It started with small things. He rearranged the garage without asking because, he said, he needed space for his equipment. He started using the word "we" about my house in a way that made my skin prickle. "We're thinking about getting a dog. We should redo the back deck eventually. He never once offered to contribute to groceries. Not once in 6 months did he say, 'Let me get this one.' I am not a woman who needs to be reimbursed for every egg, but I notice things. I always have. What I noticed most was this. Nathan treated my house like a hotel that happened to come with a complimentary grandmother attached. He left dishes in the sink. He had loud phone calls in the kitchen at 9 in the morning when I was trying to read. He once, and I will never forget this, reorganized my pantry without telling me, moving things I'd kept in the same spot for 30 years. And when I mentioned it, he laughed and said, 'I figured you'd be glad to have it done.' Patrice would smooth things over. He means well, Mom. He's just comfortable here. Take it as a compliment. I took it as data. I was still paying for the groceries. I was still covering all the utilities. And here's the part that will make you understand that moment at the dinner table. I had continued sending money to a rental account even after they moved in. Let me explain. When they first arrived, Nathan mentioned, casually, as if it were nothing, that their lease wasn't up yet and the landlord was holding their security deposit over some disputed damages. He asked if I could keep the rent contributions going for a couple of months while it got sorted, just to cover the overlap. I agreed. 2 months turned into 4. I kept asking Patrice about the deposit situation. She kept saying Nathan was handling it. My notebook by December read $31,200. $31,200. I closed the notebook one evening and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I thought about Frank, who worked overtime every Thanksgiving weekend for 20 years so we could pay off our mortgage early. I thought about what he would say if he could see that notebook. I already knew what he'd say if he could see that notebook. I already knew what he'd say. I made a decision. Not to confront anyone. Not yet. First, I was going to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I called my son Kevin and told him everything. Not to ask his opinion. I'd already made up my mind. But because he deserved to know and because I needed to say it out loud to someone who loved me. Kevin was quiet for a long time. "Mom," he finally said, "does Patrice know about all of it? The full amount?" "I don't think so," I said. "She knows about the early help. I don't think she knows it kept going or how much." Another silence. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to wait," I said, "for the right moment." The right moment came sooner than I expected. It was a Tuesday night in February. I'd made pot roast, Frank's mother's recipe, low and slow all afternoon, the kind that fills the whole house with something that smells like safety. We were at the dinner table, the three of us. Nathan had been in a strange mood all day. Clipped. Something was bothering him, though he hadn't said what. Patrice was cheerful in the way she got when she was trying to make up for him. Halfway through dinner, I mentioned that I'd been thinking about having my sister Lorraine visit in the spring. She lives in Arizona now, and we don't see each other much. I said I'd probably have her stay in the guest room, the same guest room Nathan had set up as a kind of home office. Nathan put his fork down. "That's kind of short notice," he said. I looked at him. "It's February. Spring is April at the earliest. Still, I've got my setup in there. Equipment, files. It would be a whole thing to move." I set my own fork down very calmly. "Nathan, that is my guest room." He met my eyes and he said it. Relaxed. Steady. Like it was a perfectly reasonable thing to say. "Look, I get that this is your house, but we're trying to build something here, and honestly, the way you hover, the way you insert yourself, it's suffocating. We're adults. My mother would never." He stopped. Maybe he saw something change in my face. Maybe he had enough self-awareness to hear himself. But he'd said enough. "Your mother," I said slowly. "She gives us space. She trusts us. She's not constantly, 'Nathan.'" My voice was very quiet. "How much does your mother give you every month?" He blinked. "Because I've been sending rent money to the account you gave me since before you moved in here. I have $31,200 written in a notebook in my kitchen drawer. Every transfer, every date. And you're sitting in my house, eating the food I bought, using the electricity I pay for, and you'd like me to also vacate a room for your home office." The table was completely silent. Patrice had gone pale. "31,000, she whispered. "Yes. Mom, I knew about the early help, but I didn't. Nathan, did you know she was still—" Nathan said nothing. His jaw was tight. "I kept sending it," I said, "because I love my daughter, and I told myself it was helping. But tonight you sat at my table and told me I was suffocating you." I folded my napkin. "So I think what you meant to say was thank you." No one spoke. I got up, carried my plate to the kitchen, and stood at the sink for a moment looking out at the backyard. The yard Frank had mowed every Saturday from April to October for 30 years. The garden where I still grow tomatoes every summer. My house. My life. The one I had built and paid for and kept going through 6 years of grief alone. I heard Patrice's voice behind me, low and urgent, talking to Nathan. I didn't turn around. After a while, she came and stood beside me. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there. "Mom," she finally said. Her voice was different, smaller. "I didn't know it was that much." "I know you didn't." "Are you angry with me?" I thought about it honestly. "Not at you," I said. "I'm angry that I let it go on so long without saying anything. That's on me." She put her head on my shoulder the way she used to when she was small. I let her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "we have an honest conversation. You, me, and your husband. About what real help looks like. About what it means to be a guest in someone's home. About money and respect, and the difference between family and free lodging." She nodded against my shoulder. "And Lorraine," I said, "is getting the guest room." There was a long pause. Then Patrice laughed, a short, surprised sound, and I felt some of the tightness leave my chest. We went back to the table. Nathan was still sitting there. He looked different now. The confidence was gone. He looked like someone who had finally understood what they'd been standing on. We talked for 2 hours that night. It wasn't easy. Nathan did not apologize quickly or gracefully, but he did apologize. And somewhere in that long, uncomfortable conversation, I told him something I meant. I don't dislike you, Nathan. I never did. But I cannot be invisible in my own home, and I cannot keep writing amounts in that notebook while you tell me I'm suffocating you. Those two things cannot exist at the same time. He nodded. He looked at his hands. They moved out 2 months later, not in anger, in a plan. Nathan had in fact landed a real contract. They found a small house to rent in a neighborhood they liked, and Patrice called me the day they got the keys, crying happy tears this time. The guest room is my sewing room now, for the time being. Lorraine visited in April, and we stayed up until 1 in the morning 2 nights in a row, talking about everything and nothing, the way sisters do when they finally have the time. I still have the spiral notebook. I haven't thrown it away. Some people ask me if I regret the money. The honest answer is, I regret the silence around it. The $31,200 was love, even when it was misplaced. What I regret is pretending it wasn't happening, letting it grow in that notebook while I smiled at the dinner table and said nothing. Patience is not the same as avoidance. It took me 68 years to really learn the difference. I talk to Patrice twice a week now. She finished her teaching certification last spring, and she's in a 3rd grade classroom in Cincinnati, and she calls me on her lunch break sometimes, just to check in. Nathan and I are careful with each other, respectful. It's not warm yet, not entirely, but it's honest. I'll take honest over warm any day. Frank would have handled the whole thing differently, probably. More directly, sooner. He never was one for waiting. But I am. And when the moment came, I was ready. The pot roast was good that night, by the way. Even with everything, I noticed that. Frank's mother's recipe never fails. I've thought about that Tuesday night a lot since it happened. Not obsessively, I'm too old for that. But the way you think about something that finally cracked open after being sealed shut for too long. What I keep coming back to is this. Nothing that happened to me or to Patrice and Nathan was random. Every piece of it followed from a choice. Mine, theirs, all of it. I chose to send the first check because I loved my daughter and I wasn't going to let pride get in the way of helping her. That was the right choice. But then I chose silence, on top of silence, month after month, writing numbers in a notebook and saying nothing, and that choice had its own consequences, just as real, just as earned. We tell ourselves that staying quiet is the kind thing, that not making waves is generosity. I believed that for a long time, but what I actually did, by keeping that notebook to myself for 22 months, was allow a situation to grow into something that could have damaged my relationship with my daughter permanently. My silence didn't protect anyone. It just delayed the accounting. Nathan said I was suffocating them, and maybe in some way I didn't intend. I was not by hovering, but by making it too easy to not grow up. When someone hands you a soft landing every single time you stumble, they aren't always helping you learn to walk. I don't say that to excuse what Nathan did, because sitting at someone's table, in their home, eating their food, and telling them they're a burden, that's its own kind of failure. That's a failure of character. But I played a part in setting that stage, and I can own that now. What I relearned from all of this, and I say relearned because Frank tried to teach me this about 30 years ago, is that real love requires honesty more than it requires comfort. The $31,200 was love, but it was love wrapped in avoidance, and avoidance is not a virtue. Honesty is. Saying the hard thing at the right moment, calmly, without cruelty, that's what actually changes things, not the check, the conversation. I think about the kind of woman I want to be at 68, not the woman who absorbs everything quietly until something breaks, not the woman who keeps score in secret and then drops it all at once like a verdict, but the woman who speaks the truth early enough that it can actually help, who has enough respect for the people she loves to tell them when something is wrong before it becomes a wound. Patrice is in her classroom now, teaching 8-year-olds how to read. Nathan is working, genuinely working from what she tells me. The house on Clovermill Road is mine again, and it's quiet in the way I've made my peace with. I still have the notebook. I'm not sure I'll ever throw it away. Not because I want to hold on to what happened, but because it reminds me of the lesson I should have already known. The longer you wait to tell the truth, the more it costs everyone, including yourself.